Hi guys, welcome to the 13th video of Chess Eddie, and in this video we will be talking about castling. So in this video I'll give you two examples for each rule of castling. So castling is when you move your king 2 squares from its starting square, either to the left or the right. So I'll explain this later with more examples from the chessboard. And for the white king, this means that the king moves from e1 to either g1 or c1. Either rooks can then jump or hop over the king and land on the next square. For the white side, this would be d1 or f1. There are 3 important rules about castling. Your king and rook must both be on their starting squares, and they must not move during the game. So that means that you can't really use them, you can't move them if you want to castle. You can't castle while you're in check, and you also can't castle if your king is blocked by a check. So I will explain that later. So yeah, now we can go to the examples, and yeah, let me set up the first example right now. Okay, so I'm back with the first example. And this example is just of the 2 ways that you can castle. So there are 2 ways that you can castle. The castling queenside, which is this way over here, and then the rook will go this way. So let me show you to that. You do that. So basically, the king will go on c1, and the rook will go on d1. So that would be castling queenside. Also, castling kingside would be the king going on g1 and the rook going on f1. So castling is important because of king safety, and it also allows you to develop your pieces. But for black, it's the same thing. So basically, it's just on the last row. So for black, if you castle kingside, which would be like this, the rook would go to f8, and the king would go to g8. So the castling is the only opportunity you have to move 2 pieces at the same time during the game. For black now, queenside is king goes to c8, a rook goes to d8. So the a rook, so this square, because of the a coordinate, and this is the h rook because of the h coordinate, h letter right here. So yeah, that was my first example of castling and how you actually do the castling. So for my next example, I'm gonna show you an example where you cannot castle. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back with my second example, and this example is the one that I was saying that you can't castle if there's a check or a piece blocking the king or the rook. Not physically blocking, but by the attack, as you can see. So right here, the king can't just jump over the attack of the bishop. So he can't castle kingside because it would be illegal to jump over the attack of the b5 bishop. White can't also castle queenside right here because of this bishop attacking the c1 square, and because of this, not even the rook can do it. And even though if the bishop would be here instead of the dark square right here, the king would just can't even move like here or d1 or f1. While if it would have been here, the king can move to d1, but it can't castle because of this square being attacked on c1 by this bishop. So in this case, black can castle now instead of white, who can't castle because black doesn't have any attackers blocking him from castling. So that was my second example of a scenario where you can't castle. And now I'm going to show you my third example, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back with my third example, and it is black to move right now. And let's say if black either moves to e6 on this square, so this square, or e7, coordinate e7 or e6. So right now I'm just going to use e7 right now. So as you can see here, white is now checking the king on e1. So in this case, white cannot castle at this moment because he's in check, and it is illegal to move, king in check. Castle when your king is in check. So the white king has to either move here, so here, 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 or here, but it cannot castle like here. So yeah, that was my third example of how you cannot castle when you're in check. So right now I'm gonna bring another example of where you cannot castle. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I forgot to mention that another scenario where you can't castle is when you're being blocked by his pieces. This time it's physically by the bishop and the knight on g1. So bishop on c1 and the knight on g1. So in this case, white can't castle. Just first of all, the bishop is just on the c1 square, where the king would have to go anyway when castling queenside. Second of all, there's a piece blocking it, and the rook can't just hop over the bishop because, if you remember, the knight is the only piece to be able to hop over or jump over pieces. And also this knight, it can't, it still blocks the king because the king still has to go on g1 when castling kingside. And once more, the rook can't hop over the knight and go to f1. So pieces blocking the king and the rooks from castling just doesn't allow king to castle. Pretty straightforward. So yeah, that was my fourth example, and right now I'm gonna go to my fifth example. So I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so I'm back here with the fifth example, and in this example I'm going to show you that you cannot move your pieces during move your king or the rook to castle. So right here if the rook were to move on f1, the king and rook wouldn't be able to castle. And throughout the game, even if the king remains on e1 and the rook goes back to h1, it doesn't mean that the king can castle. So even if, let's say, the rook goes to f1 and then after a move goes back to h1, it no longer can castle. The king and rook can no longer castle. Same thing for black. If the rook chooses to move to, if the a rook chooses to go to d8, attacking this d file, so d column, if you want to call it, then even if it moves them back to a8, then the king then just can't castle back queenside. Oh, and I took off the rook here just to make it simpler. I mean, it's the same thing. Even if I were to add a rook here, it would be the same thing as I just showed you for black. So if the rook moves there and then back, no longer can castle. So same thing for the king, and the king, if it moves anywhere to, like for example, if I were to take off, if I were to take off this pawn, then the king would be, if it were to move on either f2, f1, e2, d1, or d2, still wouldn't be able to castle, even if it would have came back from either of those squares. I mean, same thing for the rest of all the squares on the board, because even then, if it comes back, then it's to e1, its starting position, it still can't e1 or e8, depending on what color you are. Then you still can't castle no matter what. So the king and the rook have to stay still for yourself to castle. So those were my 5 examples, and yeah, castling, as I said before, is useful for king safety and developing pieces. So for example, developing pieces, I mean by maybe moving your bishop to d3 and then maybe your other bishop to e3 to gain more space on the white side. Developing pieces, meaning that you help your position grow and become better. So castling is very useful and important, but in some cases castling isn't really that good, and let me show you an example by that, and what I mean by that actually, yeah. So I'll be right back with the 6th example actually, with the explanation why castling isn't really that good in some scenarios. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back, and with my explanation why castling isn't really that good. So in this position, black is way ahead of pieces, material if you want to call it. Okay, so if white castles in this position, if white castle's in this position, he's in big trouble because of this checkmate. So, yeah, that's an example of why castling isn't really that good in some scenarios, as I said before. So, yeah, only castle if you're you think you're safe and you have a lot of pieces, or at least some defenders around your fort or castle when you castle. And yeah, so that was my 13th video. I hope you enjoyed it, and so make sure to like, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and yeah, so I hope you enjoyed my 13th video, and I'll see you on the next one. So see you later. Bye.